Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar all about statutory sick pay in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice and I'm going to be presenting today's webinar. I'm also joined by my colleague Duncan, who's going to be answering your questions on the Q&A throughout the session as well. Now, this session is the first session in our Statutory Payments 2025 badge series, where we're running loads of different sessions on different statutory payments. And if you attend at least 4 of the sessions, plus our statutory payments quiz, you will be able to earn that digital badge. So more information on that towards the end of the session. And let's also look at what we'll be covering in today's session. So I'm going to begin with a bit of an introduction to statutory sick pay, or SSP. We'll then move on to recording sickness. Now, there is a few ways to do this in Sage 50 Payroll, so I'll be kind of looking at both of those options. We'll also look at adjusting your employees' payments to account for this SSP that you'll be paying them. And then we also have a section on troubleshooting towards the end. So if something's not looking quite right or you're expecting it to be a different figure, just kind of what you can check to kind of troubleshoot any issues with the SSP. Well, let's get started with that introduction then. So what is SSP? Well, it stands for statutory sick pay, and it's the minimum amount that you should pay to qualifying employees when they're off sick. It's going to be paid to employees when they're ill, when they're unable to come to work, but you might pay them a little bit more if you've got a particular company sick pay scheme, which is something that we'll loop back to a little bit later. The rate of statutory sick pay is a weekly rate of £116.75. That is for the 2024-25 tax year. And that's actually due to increase when the new tax year comes around. So from April, it is going to be going up to a weekly rate of £118.75, and that's for the 2025-26 tax year. Now, this doesn't relate to the employee's payment frequency, so there could be monthly, weekly, fortnightly, etc. It is going to be a weekly rate regardless, and that is for a period of incapacity for work of up to 28 weeks. So that is the entitlement of SSP. And let's also look at some qualifying conditions that an employee must meet for statutory sick pay. So first of all, employees must have an employment contract and have also done some work under that contract. So if you've hired someone new and they actually ring in sick before they work for you, they don't meet that qualifying condition. They must have been sick for 4 or more days in a row, and that does include non-working days. And this is known as a period of incapacity for work, or a PIW. So you will hear me say that quite a few times during the webinar. So PIW just means period of incapacity for work. They do need to be earning an average of at least £123 per week too. That average is taken in the 8-week period prior to the first day of sickness, or it's taken from any periods that they've worked if that is less than 8 weeks. And in the new tax year, that earnings threshold will be going up as well. So instead of £123 per week, it's going to be £125 per week, just to let you know. And lastly, they do also need to give you notice and proof of illness when needed. So what I mean by that is like a sick note or a statement of fitness to work for proof. If the sickness lasts 7 days or less, the employee can self-certify their sickness. But if it's more than 7 days, you can and should ask for proof of illness, which would be like a more official sick note. And there is more information linked at the bottom of this slide on eligibility, as well as what to do if an employee doesn't qualify for SSP. So that link there will take you to the gov.uk information. That is the qualifying conditions. And kind of lastly for the introduction, just a few more general rules for SSP as well. So the SSP payment itself is only going to be for qualifying days. So these are the employee's normal working days or contracted working days. So for me, for example, my contracted working days are Monday to Friday, which means that my qualifying days for SSP would be Monday to Friday. You would pay SSP on the employee's normal pay date, so there's no need to change that up or anything. And the first 3 qualifying days are known as waiting days, so no SSP is going to be payable for these. So for example, an employee would go on sick, but the SSP wouldn't kick in until that fourth qualifying day of absence. The exception for this is known as a linked period. This is when there's a period of sickness with a gap of 8 weeks or less from that previous period of sickness. For a linked period, the sickness itself doesn't need to be related to the previous one. It can be for a different reason. As long as the gap is 8 weeks or less, they won't serve those 3 waiting days again for that new PIW. And the sick pay would instead kind of kick in and resume from that first qualifying day. But also remember that PIW would still need to be 4 days or more to qualify for SSP. So just as an example, let's say somebody was off sick for 2 weeks, then 4 weeks later they were off again, but only for 2 days. So yes, that new sickness is within 8 weeks, so would be a linked period. But because that second instance of 2 days wasn't 4 days or more, that actually doesn't qualify for SSP to begin with. And you'll see a little bit more about this when I do the demonstration in the programme, and that'll kind of, put it into practice a bit more. But before I do that, I do want to move on to recording sickness in Sage 50 Payroll. So as I said, there are a few ways that you can record sickness in the programme. It just depends on which way that you would prefer to do it. The first option is to use the absence diary. Now this is found in the employee record and then the absence tab, or you can also find this in the SSP tab in Enter Payments. So that is where you would do it in the absence diary. The other option you've got is the quick SSP option. This is going to be found in your payroll links section and also in your employee tasks. So a couple of places to find each of those options. Quick SSP also has the option to print like a report of the information that you've inputted as well, so it's good to kind of keep for your own record if you wish as well. Now, regardless of which way you use, once you've inputted that information, it's going to produce information that will show on the absence diary. And this is going to show in the form of various letters and symbols, depending on what that date in the diary is. So we'll go through what these mean. The first letter that you might see is the letter X. This is going to indicate a waiting day, so the first 3 qualifying days of sickness in a PIW. You'll either see a lowercase or an uppercase X. Lowercase is going to mean it's for the current period that hasn't yet been updated and paid, so you've not updated the records yet. Or if it's a capital letter, that means it's for a historical period that has already been updated and already been paid. Next letter that you might see is a P, that is for a paid SSP day. And same goes with that lowercase being current, like an unupdated pay run, and then the capital letter being historical and already paid. You might also see a dash or an equal sign. This is going to represent a non-qualifying day. So for me, for example, I work Monday to Friday. I would see these symbols over the weekend as they're my non-qualifying days or non-working days. You could also see a red letter A, so this would represent sickness absence which doesn't qualify for SSP, usually because it's less than 4 days in a row, so not quite long enough to qualify for SSP, and therefore it hasn't formed a PIW. And then last letter that you might see there is a W. This is a day marked as SSP withheld. So this would appear after all of the 28 weeks entitlements being paid, or there is a little tick box that you can tick to kind of withhold that SSP for another reason. So it could be that you've ticked that instead. Now you will see most, if not all, of these symbols in the demonstration, so do keep an eye out for them. And I'll explain kind of, again, what they mean as we go along. Now, I've been talking about qualifying and non-qualifying days. In order to actually determine what qualifies as a qualifying day, you will need to set up a working day pattern for your employee. Now, this means you'd be able to use it to record waiting days and then the paid SSP days. And as you can see on that image, the pattern's going to consist of N's and Q's. This just means non-qualifying and qualifying. The employee's waiting days and paid SSP days would only be recorded on the qualifying days as per their pattern. And once that sickness is recorded, You can check it and enter payments, see how much it's paying, how many weeks it's paying, and from there you can also edit, extend or delete current sickness if required. Just bear in mind with SSP as well, it is calculated up to and including your process date, and that's the same with all statutory payments. So it's only going to pay the employee what's calculated in the current pay period. So if you've got a couple of days which fall after the process date, for example, they would be paid in a future pay period. So that was a little bit of an insight into what SSP is, a bit of an introduction there, how to qualify and how you can record it as well. I would now like to go into a demonstration in the programme, just put a bit of this into practice to show you all. So let me just bring up Payroll. So I'm logged into my company, I've got a monthly payroll here. And first thing I'm going to do is just double check my process dates set to my next pay date, which for me is going to be the 31st of January 2025. So I pay my employees on the last day of each month. And what this means is any sickness entries up to and including this date will be used in the calculations for SSP. Great. I mentioned there are a few ways to enter SSP. First of all, I'm going to show you how to do it in the absence diary. So if I select employee number 1, this person's been off sick. I'm just going to open up the record. And one place that you can find the absence diary is just on the absence tab there. But before we actually record anything on this diary, I do need to set up the employee's working day pattern just to determine those qualifying days. So from further information, I'm just going to click on SSP, Statutory Sick Pay, and I'm just going to go into the Qualifying Days tab. Now for this employee, I can see there's already a pattern in here. This is probably the most common one for a Monday to Friday working pattern. So it goes from Sunday to Saturday. We've got the N for the Sunday and Saturday, and then of course qualifying days, Monday to Friday. So if these are the employee's working days each week, it's just going to repeat that pattern weekly, starting from this pattern date. Now this date isn't too important really, as long as it is in the past and before the absence, you should be good to go with that. If the pattern isn't correct here and you do need to change that, you are able to change it in this drop down. So there's some alternative ones in here. For example, we've got like a Monday to Thursday pattern there, or a weekend pattern if they only work Saturdays and Sundays. Or actually you can enter your own bespoke pattern, which can last more than a week. So for example, if your employee works shifts, if you just click in the kind of gap underneath here, you can pop in your own pattern. Let's just pop in some random ones for a couple of weeks. Let's say they had like a 3-week shift pattern, you'd be able to enter that there. And what it's going to do is work through this 1 week at a time. So week 1, 2, 3, and then it would start from the top again, 4, 5, 6, and just kind of work through this. So as you can see, depending on the employee, the working pattern can become quite complex. It just depends on the situation, but you can, change that according to the employee. Another thing, if your employee doesn't have set days that they work, maybe they're like more casual worker, HMRC guidance does allow you and the employee to agree on like a standard working pattern for them for the purposes of SSP. So you could pick one from the drop down or just create your own and then of course just type that in the gap there. I'm just going to stick with Monday to Friday for this example, so I'll get rid of those other weeks. That pattern start date's all good, and I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. We'll see this message come up. Now this is just kind of warning you that you've changed it. It could affect any SSP information that's already been entered. Do we want to continue? And we'll just click yes. So this now means that this employee's qualifying days and SSP days will only land on weekdays. And now that that pattern's sorted, we can now go ahead and record that sick pay in the diary. One way you can do this on here is just using this diary entry button. If I click on this, we can see we can select SSP and sickness. That's kind of what it's defaulted already. And you're able to enter the dates from and to. So just using this calendar icon, this employee was off in January, so it's just the 6th of January until the 17th. So a couple of weeks there. If you need to enter a comment, if you've got a sick note, for example, so if I say a sick note received, and then click OK, we can see it's entered that sick pay there on the diary. So I can see those dates recorded. And that's actually got some of the symbols that I was talking about earlier. So firstly, just notice that all of the symbols there are in lowercase, as it's the current, unupdated and unpaid pay period. We've first of all got those 3 X's, so this is the 3 waiting days for this PIW. They're not going to be paid any SSP for these, along with a couple of paid SSP days more there. And then of course the weekend, because they're non-qualifying days for this employee, they're just showing as the dash symbols. Little tip with this as well, it is important to make sure that the sickness is continuous, especially if the employee hasn't returned to work. Do just make sure you've made that continuous so there's no gaps or anything like that, just to avoid any problems with like calculations of SSP. So that is one way that you can record it via the diary entry. If you've made a mistake, maybe you've added it to the wrong person, a quick way that you can remove the absence as well is you can left click and drag the dates, right click and then click none. So that is just a quick way to remove that absence if you've made a mistake, for example. Another way to quickly add that SSP on the absence diary, again, is to just do it directly on here. So you could left click and drag the dates. You can see confirmation of that date selection at the top. You can right click, select SSP or anything else that you need to, obviously. Due to sickness. Again, you do have the option of adding a comment, so sick note received, and that adds them on there too. So we can see those working days, the waiting days there, and then the paid SSP days. And I'll just go ahead and click save. So that's a sickness recorded the first way. This is via the absence diary. And a little bit later, we will see that SSP automatically calculating in enter payments. But before we do that, I do want to show you the other way of recording sickness, which is going to be via the quick SSP option. So just moving on to my third employee now, they've also been off sick in January. Now, I'd recommend this quick SSP option for initially setting up sick pay for an employee. Whereas the absence diary, which I've just showed you, that's actually great for extending or continuing any existing sickness. So from payroll links, I can either click on recording sickness there, or I can also find it in the employee tasks too. So I've got recording sickness, and this is going to be that quick SSP option. So this is going to be the same information that you're entering, only this time slightly different format. All of the information's in one page instead of kind of split up onto different tabs. It's just going to be a case of entering those dates. So this employee was off from the 13th to the 22nd. I'll click calculate entitlement, and we can see the programme kind of does some checks if they can qualify, and we can see there is an entitlement due there, which actually is that weekly rate of £116.75. It also has the option of checking the qualifying days on the left for the employee. So if you needed to change this, you can just kind of quickly come in here and do that. I've got some key dates on the right and also the average earnings figure for this employee, which is £461.54. Now, if you are curious how payroll's got to this figure, you just come down here and click on earnings during set period. This is going to show you that for this employee, there's been 2 monthly payments of £2,000 to get that 8-week average of £461.54. And another great thing with this option for quick SSP, you do have the option to print a kind of summary of this information here. So all of the dates and things that you've entered, you'd be able to keep that for your own record if you wish. But I'm just going to go ahead and click save. So that is quick SSP, the alternative way to set up SSP. And if I just pop back to the absence diary for employee number 3, although we didn't enter the sickness in that, we can see it does show there still. So 3 waiting days, and then we've got the 5 paid SSP days. So a week in total, hence why it was that weekly rate. So now that the SSP's ended, we're going to pretend I've done all of the other preparations that I need to and that I'm ready to go ahead and process the pay run itself. Quick note with SSP as well, if you do pay your employees in arrears, most probably common for weekly employees, I would recommend that when you record the sickness, you just record the dates for the period that you're paying them for, and that way you will be able to pay the SSP in arrears as well. If I just go back to payroll for now, I'm going to go ahead and open up enter payments for these employees. And I'm just going to go straight ahead to that SSP/parental leave tab. So this is another place to find the absence diary. Again, you can edit and delete any current sickness that you need to in here. So I can see those absence entries there. I can also see the SSP payable and how many weeks it's paying for as well. So although this employee is off for 2 weeks, they did serve those 3 waiting days first of all. They don't get paid for them. So it actually works out to be 1.2, 1.4 weeks. So each day here is 0.2 of a week. Just moving on to that next employee as well, just in the same tab, we can see it's still showing that on the absence diary. This time it's only 1 week's worth. So we've got that weekly rate of £116.75. Now let's say this employee returned to work, so they came back to work around here, but they actually fell ill again and they had to be off sick again later in that month. I would be able to left click and drag to enter that SSP quickly in here. Right click, SSP due to sickness. I'm just going to leave that blank for now. So they were off sick again. But notice this is actually a linked period. So because this is within 8 weeks of the previous PIW, i.e. this one, the employee isn't serving those 3 waiting days again. So there's no X's for this one. It's all just paid SSP days. So it's kind of just kicked in and resumed straight away. And just to show you another symbol, let's just remove a couple of days. So say they went off again, but only for 3 days. See, it's turned into red A's. Now this is because the period of sickness is less than 4 days, so it doesn't qualify for SSP, and it's just showing as absence on the diary. But again, let's just pretend I'm extending it again by a day. There we go, changes to paid SSP, so it does qualify. So I'm just going to remove that. It was just to show you a few more symbols. But yeah, that was how to record SSP, and obviously checking it's calculating and enter payments, you are able to check that it's payable and how much it's paying as well. So a little bit of a recap of what we did there. So statutory sick pay can be recorded either via the absence diary, which is in the employee record in the absence tab, or in enter payments. And the other option you've got is that quick SSP option, also called recording sickness. That can be found in your payroll links or the employee tasks. Once you've recorded it, you'll see those absence diary entries there. So it'll have some of those letters and symbols, lowercase if it's current sickness, or capital letters for historical sickness, which you'll see shortly. And remember to set up your employee's working day pattern too, and that'll consist of N's and Q's. Also, you can edit or delete current sickness if required. You can do that using the absence diary, again in enter payments, or in the employee record too. But that does bring us on to the next section of the webinar. This is going to be all about adjusting your employees' payments to accommodate for that statutory payment. So as we've seen, the SSP will calculate automatically. but you will likely need to make some adjustments to the employee's pay, or you'll end up paying their wage as normal plus that SSP. So you might probably likely be paying them too much. So in this section, I am going to show you a few common scenarios that you might come across, but please do bear in mind, this is very company specific. It does depend on any specific policies or schemes that your company has, and of course how your company does things as well. So the first option that I'm going to be showing you is to adjust the payments using Makeup Basic. This is a really great option for companies that have a policy in place for an employee to get their full wage for a certain amount of time. And Makeup Basic allows you to reduce the employee's normal pay to take into consideration that amount of sick pay that's been calculated for them, and just help to make sure that you don't pay them too much. And I'll demonstrate that shortly. Or the next option you've got, this is a really good one if you don't have a sick pay scheme, or maybe the employees had their entitlement of sick pay, so it's run out. With this option of a manual adjustment, you can, of course, adjust the payments manually, and that is going to reduce it to the days or hours that they've worked. So there is a little calculator icon in the Enter Payments screen, which you can use for this. So yeah, let's go ahead. We'll go back to the demo, and I'll show you both of these options. So I've still got my employees who are on sick selected. Let's just go back to Enter Payments. And first of all, we've just got employee number 1. So I'm on the Payments tab. I can see they've already got their full salary in here of £2,000. But if we go to the Summary tab, I can see they're getting paid that full wage of £2,000 plus that SSP. So they're actually getting too much. So I want their total gross pay to be £2,000. For this, I'm going to use the Makeup Basic option for this employee. They're still covered by the company sick pay scheme at this point. And as a result, I want to top up this sick pay to their full normal wage. So for this option, step 1, I'm just going to make sure that they've got their full kind of basic pay in the Payments tab. And next thing I'm going to do is go to the Summary tab and click up on the Makeup Basic option. So we'll go ahead and make that adjustment now. You will get this message just to confirm that you've selected to make up to basic the statutory payment. The hours and number value of the salary pay element that I'm using will need to be reduced. Just to confirm that you want to continue, I'm going to go ahead and click yes. And straight away, we can see that total gross pay is reduced down to that £2,000 that I'd specified. So that is their full wage. But if we go back to the Payments tab again, I can see it's done this by reducing the hours and number value of my salary pay element to accommodate for that SSP that the employee was receiving. So it's reduced that amount there. And that's the perfect amount that I need to top up the SSP by to get to £2,000. So that was Makeup Basic. Fairly simple adjustment to make. The program, of course, does do those calculations for you. But that's a really good option for employees who are part of like a company sick pay scheme, which specifies them to receive their full pay for a particular period of time. Let's just click Save Next. We'll move on to employee number 3. So second scenario, let's assume that there's no sick pay scheme for this employee. I can see they do have SSP weeks at 1 week. So 5 days of SSP to pay, as of course it does take away those 3 waiting days. In this scenario, I need to work out how much to pay the employee for the days that they've worked in January. My payroll is monthly, process date of course 31st of January. And this particular employee would normally have a total of 23 working days in January, as per their working pattern of Monday to Friday. Now, bear in mind that might change, obviously based on the specific employee's contracted hours or days. But out of those 23 working days in the pay period, this employee's worked 15 as they were off sick for 8. So this manual adjustment is going to calculate that out of that full 23-day pay of £2,000, how much of this is going to be 15 days worth. And to do this adjustment, just go back to the Payments tab. Again, make sure they've got the full salary in there. Then from the hours and number box, you'll see there is a little calculator icon. In here, I'm just going to do the calculation of the days worked, which for this employee is 15, divided by the total working days in the pay period, which for this employee is 23, and then click equals. And the answer is going to be that adjusted salary. So I'll click equals, I'll click tab on my keyboard just to refresh these boxes, and you'll see it's reduced down that salary now to £1,304.40. So that is the adjustment. And if we go to the summary tab, I can see that is the 15 days of pay that payroll's worked out, plus that 1 week of SSP, and this is the amount that they're going to be getting for the month. And I'm now happy with those adjustments. I'm ready to move on with the rest of my pay run. I would like to just quickly show you how the SSP shows on a few of the pre-update reports. So if I just pretend I've entered the payments to everyone, I'll highlight all of my employees, and I'm just going to go to pre-update reports. I'll bring that across. So I do have the payslip that I use favorited here. This is just the kind of standard laser payslip. First option in the laser layouts here. And if we take a look at this, I'll just make this a little bit bigger. There we go. But for this first employee, I can nice and clearly see we've got that sick pay there. We've also got that reduced salary. So that was using the make up basic option. But we can see they're still getting that total gross pay of £2,000. And let's just go down to employee number 3, which was my next employee on sick pay. There we go. I've got that reduced salary there because of that manual adjustment. So this is 15 days worth of pay. And then, of course, that sick pay, which was a week worth because of those 3 waiting days. So it will show nice and clearly on the pay slips. Another report is actually the payment summary part 1, just from the summary section. And if I scroll down to P, we can see this one here. This is a great report to run generally before you update the records, just to kind of check all of your figures before you update the records. Again, I'll make this a bit bigger. And we can see a full kind of gross to net breakdown for the employees. And SSP actually has its own column there, so I can see employee number 1 and employee number 3 with a total at the bottom of that column for them. So that was the payment summary part 1. But I'm just going to skip ahead to update the records. There is a couple of things I want to show you after I've updated them. So I'll just double check my process date there. And then go ahead and update the records. I would always recommend, especially when you've done statutory payments, just to take a backup of your data at this point as well. Always best to have that data secure. Perfect. And we can see last updated now 31st of January. Now that the records are updated, I'm just going to go and show you the absence diary now because it will look a little bit different. So back to the absence tab. There we go, and we can see it's now showing as capital letters. So it's no longer current sickness. Because we've updated the records, it's historical. And notice I won't be able to just drag and remove this now. You will get a message pop up. So you can only kind of remove current sickness that way. And same with the other employee. Yeah, see all capital letters and the equal sign instead of the dash. Another thing as well, if we just go into the SSP from the further information and go to previous PIW, we can now see that previous sickness that we've just entered. It's now showing as the kind of most recent historical one. This is actually used to determine whether the next period of sickness is going to be a linked period or not. So this is a great screen for troubleshooting, and we will come back to that a little bit kind of in a moment. But that was adjusting your employees' payments. So either the make up basic option, which is great for scenarios where you do pay the full wage to the employee, but you want to accommodate for that statutory payment. Or you've got the manual adjustments, which can be used to calculate how much an employee gets for the days that they've worked in a period. And you can read more about both of these options with the links there on the handout. So that does bring us to the end of adjusting your employees' payments. One last section before we do end the webinar, that's going to be all about troubleshooting. So you might find that no SSP is calculating, or the amount that it's calculating is different to what you're expecting. As you've seen, there are quite a few factors that can affect how it calculates. So I've just put together a couple of things, a couple of kind of main areas to check. Make sure the information in there is correct, and you should be able to kind of spot the problem from there, and everything calculate as it should do. So first thing that I would kind of recommend checking when you're troubleshooting SSP is the process date. So just remember that SSP is going to pay up to and including the process date. So if all of the dates for the sickness are after your process date, there's going to be nothing calculating until those sickness dates fall before the process date. So just double check that. Second thing I'd recommend checking is the diary entries. So on the absence diary, what letters or symbols are appearing? Remember, if it is a red letter A, this means that the sickness is likely 4 days or less and therefore doesn't qualify for SSP. Or if the letters or symbols are capitals, payroll sees them as already being paid, it's already been updated and it's historical, so they won't be paid again. So it is going to give you a kind of good clue as to what's going on. Just a reminder of those waiting days as well, so that'll be the X's on the diary. This could mean that the SSP is showing 3 days less sick pay than you're expecting. So just in case that kind of lowers the amount of the SSP there. Next thing is going to be qualifying days. So if the SSP payable amount looks different to what you're expecting, but all of the dates and things are correct, it could be that the wrong working pattern's assigned to the employee. So just remember you can change that in the quick SSP option, or you can just go into the record and go to the SSP tab in the further information section, and you are able to change it for the employee in there. If nothing is calculating and you can't kind of figure out why, or it's not any of those options that I've just mentioned, it could also be worth checking the average earnings. So that'll be in the SSP information. It must be above £123 per week. If it's not, there won't be anything calculating for them. And then the last main thing with troubleshooting that I'd recommend is that previous PIW tab that I mentioned. So that's just in the record and SSP, and then the kind of third tab along there. So are the details in there correct? Does that reflect what's already been paid? Or maybe they've already had their entitlement of 28 weeks SSP. If they have, that sickness would begin to show as W's on the diary, meaning that it's withheld, and it wouldn't calculate anything. So if that's the case, I would recommend checking with on the gov.uk website just to see if there is anything else that employee is entitled to. And again, we do have a really handy article. I've linked this at the bottom of this slide. This is going to really help you with troubleshooting SSP and just kind of helps you to work through and check different areas of the programme step by step, just to get to the root of the problem if you need it. So that is from our help centre at sage.co.uk/help. But that does bring us to the end of the main content for statutory sick pay. Still about 5 minutes left of the session, so if you do have any more questions, just pop those in, and I will be going and helping Duncan out with those in a few minutes. Before we wrap things up, I would like to go through some further support with you as well. So for webinars, me and Duncan do run these throughout the year for Sage 50 Payroll. We've got loads coming up this month, including more on statutory payments for our 2025 badge. So this week we've got sessions on maternity pay and paternity pay still. And then coming up in the next few weeks, we've got things on shared parental pay. We've got our next HR advice session too, which is all about understanding maternity and paternity in the workplace. We've got repeat sessions for most of these as well. So it does mean that there will be a few dates and a few times to choose from for each of those sessions. And if you do want to earn the badge, if you attend at least 4 of the sessions and come along to the statutory payments quiz, you will earn your very own free digital statutory payments 2025 badge. So head to sage.co.uk/webinars, or you can click, there's a couple of links kind of throughout the handout as well. Feel free to read more about those upcoming sessions, and yeah, hopefully we will see you all there. And I have mentioned it a couple of times, all of the articles are from here as well, but this is just the Sage Help Centre, sage.co.uk/help. You can search the knowledge base here if there's anything you're needing help on. There's loads of support guides. We've got a whole webinar section as well with all of our previous recordings of the webinars. And if you do need to get in touch with the experts or get any technical support, you do have the option to do that as well. And last but not least, Sage U. So this is sageu.com, Sage University. Here you can set up a free account. You can access loads of e-learning courses. There's bite-sized learning courses as well as the opportunity to earn product certification. So if you're looking to expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll or any other Sage products that you might have with us, that is the perfect way to do it. So that's Sage University. But that has brought us to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And yeah, thanks for all of your questions as well. It looks like Duncan's been kept busy for the last hour. If you are leaving us now, remember that you can download the handout. That's going to include all of the slides that we've gone through today. And if you have found any of those questions and answers useful, do feel free to copy and paste those into something like a Word document to keep them for future reference. And last ask from me, there is going to be a short survey that you'll get as you exit the webinar. If you do have just a moment to fill that out, we would really, really appreciate that. We do read all of the feedback, and it just goes a long way to kind of help and make sure that these sessions are the best that they can be. But I can still see quite a few questions there in the Q&A. I am going to go on mute just for a few minutes to kind of help Duncan with those. So I'll be on mute for a few moments and I'll come back to say goodbye. Hello everyone, that's just me back again. Thank you so much for all of those questions. Hopefully you found the answers useful throughout the session too. But yeah, that does bring us to a close. So keep an eye on your emails. You will get a recording of the webinar coming through to you. Feel free to watch that as many times as you need to, including all of those demonstrations that we went through. We do hope you enjoy the rest of your week and that we will see you on another webinar very soon, hopefully in the Statutory Payments badge. And on behalf of me and Duncan, we will see you next time. Goodbye for now.